That massive figure wasn't just from her base salary, it included $282,000 from Thornton Township, a $4,900 monthly expense allowance, and an extra $100 vehicle stipend. Meanwhile, Dalton taxpayers had already shelled out six figures for two SUVs used by police to chauffeur her around. Altogether, she was pulling in nearly $6,000 a month in perks alone. This level of compensation, especially in a financially strained town, raised red flags across the board. Thankfully, not everyone turned a blind eye. The FBI has launched an investigation into Henyard's entire tenure, both in Dalton and Thornton Township. Subpoenas have recently been issued, and in the last 3 weeks, several current and former township employees have been questioned by federal agents. The investigation is reportedly focused on spending practices and major administrative decisions. With her term ending in May, the heat from federal authorities is only increasing. In the meantime, Dalton is turning the page. Jason House, who defeated Henyard in a landslide, has officially been sworn in as the town's new mayor. Standing before officials, he recited his oath with confidence. "I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Illinois, and faithfully discharge the duties of mayor to the best of my ability." For the people of Dalton, this wasn't just a routine ceremony. It was a new beginning after years of dysfunction. The best of my ability. Congratulations. With those final words, Jason House formally stepped into the role of mayor, prompting applause and emotional celebration. But this wasn't merely a symbolic victory. It was personal. Supporters had invested their time, energy, and thousands of dollars into House's campaign, all in hopes of removing an administration they viewed as chaotic and damaging. Now, with Henyard out, their efforts finally paid off. For Dalton residents, this marked more than just a political shift. It was a resounding rejection of corruption and misrule. The election wasn't close. It was a blowout. The community had spoken loud and clear. They were done tolerating scandals. Henyard, once seemingly untouchable and backed by powerful allies, was removed in dramatic fashion. Some even labeled her time in office a horror show. Politically, that chapter is now closed, but one burning question still remains. Will Tiffany Henyard be arrested or indicted? On the surface, the evidence against her looks overwhelming. Federal raids, financial inconsistencies, cooperating witnesses, and a mountain of subpoenas. Normally, that kind of activity signals a coming indictment. But as anyone familiar with the FBI knows, federal investigations operate on their own timeline. And just because there's smoke doesn't always mean there will be fire, at least, not immediately. Still, it's impossible to ignore the sheer weight of federal attention now centered on Tiffany Henyard. From multiple active investigations to a flood of interviews with township insiders, the spotlight has never been brighter. And now there's public confirmation of grand jury activity, an unmistakable sign that things are moving. It's starting to feel like the gears of justice are slowly grinding forward. If you're a betting man, the odds seem to lean heavily toward eventual criminal charges. The paper trail, the testimonies, the financial inconsistencies, it all adds up to a troubling picture. But as anyone familiar with federal investigations knows, the FBI plays by its own rules. They move at their own pace. And even when everything seems to point toward an indictment, that outcome is never guaranteed. So, what do you think? Are we witnessing the final chapter of a political scandal that will end in downfall, or is this just another case that fizzles out quietly with no real consequences? The reality is nobody can say for sure. The wheels of justice turn slowly, and the final outcome remains uncertain. But one thing is undeniable. This story isn't over. Not by a long shot. The people of Dalton, the investigators, and even the national press are still watching closely. Whether Tiffany Henyard ends up behind bars or simply fades from public view, her legacy has already been written in controversy. And the next chapter is yet to unfold. Tiffany Henyard just lost both of her jobs in a political landslide. At 10 p.m., the results were clear. Jason House had defeated Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard in the town's primary election. It wasn't even close. House won by a wide margin. after months of controversies that plagued Henyard's time in office. His campaign promise? Clean house. And tonight, he and his supporters are celebrating a hard-fought primary victory that symbolizes a clear mandate from the people of Dalton. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Tiffany Henyard, or wondering why her downfall has been so dramatic, let's get into it. The list of scandals is too long to squeeze into one video unless you've got an hour to spare. But let's start with one of the most explosive. She hired a registered child sex offender and put him on the public payroll. Not only that, this man was sent into residents' homes as a code enforcement officer. Yes, you heard that right. Man in question, 46-year-old Lavelle Redmond, is a close friend of Henyard. In September, she hired him without the approval of the village board. Redmond had previously served 25 years in prison for the gang rape and brutal beating of 2 teenage girls back in the 1990s. After the media exposed this shocking hire, Redmond was arrested again, this time for violating the reporting requirements of the sex offender registry. Residents were understandably furious. But the list doesn't end there. Henyard was also known for her generous overtime payments, specifically to the police officers on her personal security detail. After being elected in 2021, she began handpicking Dalton cops to serve her, and their paychecks ballooned. According to Freedom of Information records, officers on her detail often clocked over 100 hours in a 2-week period, and in one case, Officer Terry Young logged 303 hours. His paycheck, more than $13,000 for just 2 weeks of work. To put that in perspective, there are only 336 hours in a 2-week period, meaning Officer Young wasn't paid for just 33 hours. It raised serious questions about payroll abuse and favoritism. This wasn't occasional overtime, it was systemic and taxpayer-funded. And while these officers raked in thousands, the village's financial health and trust in local government were collapsing under Henyard's watch. And let's not forget one of the most jaw-dropping stunts, locking the trustees out of village hall. That's right. Tiffany Henyard literally locked out the city council, forcing them to hold an official board meeting outside in the parking lot. It wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. Why? According to the trustees, there were items on the agenda Henyard didn't want passed, so she simply shut the doors. It was the kind of power move that left residents stunned. Then came the Vegas trips. Yes, while Dalton residents were watching, their services crumble, Henyard was taking trips to Las Vegas, again on the taxpayers' dime. These were not official delegations or business development events. They were viewed by many as pure extravagance, rubbing salt in the wounds of a town already in financial and moral crisis. For many, it was the last straw in a string of arrogance and mismanagement. In May, Mayor Tiffany Henyard and several top officials jetted off to Las Vegas, officially to attend a shopping center conference. But to this day, no one knows if that trip brought any actual deals to Dalton. Residents were left in the dark, and surprisingly, so were the trustees. "I don't handle anything with credit cards," one official claimed during a heated board meeting. But when confronted with charges tied to the trip, the denial was quick and awkward. "You didn't go to Las Vegas?" someone asked. "Of course I did," came the reply, though the funding source remained murky. But Henyard's controversies weren't just financial, they turned physical too. During a township meeting in Thornton, chaos erupted into a full-blown fistfight. Activist Jediah Brown had just called Henyard an expletive during the public comment session. As he moved toward the mayor's table, her supporters, including her boyfriend, stood up to confront him. Things escalated rapidly, and to the shock of many, Tiffany Henyard herself jumped into the brawl. "It's one thing when the guys were fighting," one witness said, "but when she jumped in, I was floored." And while all of this was unfolding, Henyard continued collecting a hefty paycheck. She held 2 elected positions at the same time, mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township. Her combined compensation in 2022 exceeded $287,000. But that wasn't the peak. By the end of her term, she granted herself a raise, citing job stress. That bumped her annual income to over $347,000. more than the mayor of Chicago was making.